Anyway, in her book, Pastor Pete, by the way, is on vacation. He's in North Carolina visiting Trey and his grandchildren, and so he'll be back next week. But in her book, Amazing Grace, A Vocabulary of Faith, author Kathleen Norris describes a game she used to play with elementary school-aged children. If it's all right with you, I'd like to share the gist of it with you this morning. Kathleen would start by making a deal with the children. First, you get to make noise, she would bargain. But after that, you'll make silence. Well, as you can imagine, the time of noise was always predictably chaotic. It was filled with shouting, pounding, and stomping, like a football team exploding from a locker room. But what followed was unexpectedly passionate and creative. When the children were asked to write about their time spent in silence, Norris reports that their images often had a depth and maturity that was unlike anything else they wrote. For example, one boy discovered that silence is a tree spreading its branches to the sun. Another child's poem actually took on a prayerful tone. It said something like this: silence is spiders spinning their web. It's like a silkworm making its silk. Lord, help me to know when to be silent. Pretty sweet, huh? But there was one little girl in particular who offered a gem of wisdom that Norris finds herself returning to whenever her own life becomes too busy or distracting. Listen to what she discovered. That little girl wrote, "Silence reminds me to take my soul with me wherever I go." I like that, don't you? And from the heart and mind of a child, no less. In case you missed it, let me read it for you again. That perceptive little girl wrote, "Silence reminds me to take my soul with me wherever I go." What amazing insight. The truth is, that little girl recognized something most of us are completely unaware of. She noticed something we too need to grab hold of. You see, unfortunately, many of us have a tendency to rush through life, don't we? And in so doing, without even knowing it, we leave our soul behind. Think about it. We're often overburdened, overstressed, and overwhelmed by things that are as inconsequential as they are inevitable. We make mountains out of molehills, don't we? In fact, I'd like you to answer this question for me, if you would, rhetorically, of course. Do you ever find yourself in a hurry, even when there's no reason to hurry? Now think about that for a moment. Why do you suppose that is? Why do you feel the need to hurry, even when there's no reason to hurry? Could it be you failed to bring your soul along with you? Is it possible the angst you experience that leads you to hurry and rush is a symptom of a spiritual condition? I don't know about you, but I don't think it too presumptuous to say that it is. In fact, consider this. The great New England preacher Philip Brooks was known for his poise and quiet manner. At times, however, even he suffered from moments of frustration and irritability. One day a friend saw him feverishly pacing the floor like a caged lion. "What's the trouble, Mr. Brooks?" he asked. "The trouble is," Brooks responded, "I'm in a hurry, but God isn't." And don't we often feel much the same way? When we're in a hurry, it often feels like God isn't, right? God, you just turned that light red. I needed it green. The truth is, God just doesn't seem to accommodate our hurried and anxious manner, does he? Instead, he says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." So this causes me to wonder, doesn't it you? I mean, if we were created in God's image, and God is never hurried or stressed out, then where does our angst come from? Why aren't we more like the one in whose image we were fashioned? Well, I think author Glenn Pease gives at least a partial explanation. In his book, The Fruit of Peace, he writes, "We live in a culture where speed is king. I find myself in a hurry even if there's no reason. People get uptight today if they miss a revolution in a revolving door. We are an uptight generation of compulsive activists," he writes. "There are 10 times more things to do in a day than anyone can do, and so we feel we are always behind and failing to do all that we could. All we do is respond to stimuli. We want peace, but it just does not fit into our agenda. Peace calls for doing nothing sometimes, and we can't handle that. Pascal, the great Christian philosopher and scientist, said most of man's troubles come from his inability to be still. Well, what do you think about all that? Particularly the Pascal quote. Pascal said that most of our troubles are a result of our inability to be still. In other words, we've all got ants in our pants that are leading us into this restless heart syndrome, right? In addition, I would propose to you this morning that all of our running around has caused us to misplace our soul. Yep, somewhere along the way, we've lost it. We've left it behind. Thus, we're running on empty, aren't we? Our emotional and spiritual tanks have run dry, and they need to be filled anew. It's like the story I heard about an outreach one particular church conducted. The congregation was told to show up dressed in comfortable clothing. That was the only direction they were given. When they got to the church, the pastor said, okay, folks, today we're going to go up to the gas station up the street. We're going to give $25 of gas to the first 150 cars that come through. So people broke into groups to pump gas, to clean windows, and to pay the cashier. But before they left, their pastor prayed that the Lord would bring folks who needed to see the faithfulness of God. The following is the testimony of one of their volunteers. Listen to what he said. He said, one woman pulled a van up to our spot, and she opened her door as her window would not come down. Some started pumping gas and cleaning her window, so I went over to speak to her. As I started to grab the handle on her door, she opened it first. All of a sudden, I was face to face with a young woman whose eyes had turned red, and the tears started to flow and would not stop. She grabbed me, not just hugged me, but grabbed me, as though it was all she could do to stand. She said, "You don't know what this means to me. I have 4 kids and no money. Our gas light came on, and I saw your sign for free gas." She told more of her story of pain, loss, and hopelessness, and then hugged me again. I looked in her car, and all I could see were the remnants of what a car with 4 children looks like. She was on empty physically, spiritually, and emotionally, but God knew, didn't he? This man concluded. And can I tell you something this morning, folks? God knows about you too. He does. He knows you're tired. He knows you're distracted. He knows how frustrated you are. And he knows how irritable you've become. Yes, God knows how increasingly disillusioned and disappointed you've grown in your life. And like the ministry of that local church, God's offering to fill your tank this morning. He's offering to refresh and equip you for the days ahead. As a matter of fact, would it be all right if I posed another question? Well, it doesn't matter. I'm going to anyway. Don't you think you've been running on fumes for long enough? I mean, aren't you sick and tired of it? Aren't you tired of always hurrying and scurrying about and being irritable and frustrated? If so, then let me tell you something. The time has come for you to stop and to fill your tank. The time has come for you to accept Jesus' invitation in Matthew 11, verses 28 through 30. You might remember. There he beckons us. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." So you see, that's what this morning's message is all about. It's about making sure your tank is full. But that raises the question, doesn't it? I mean, just what is it that fills your tank? I'd like you to consider that question for a moment. You see, you can't keep on the way you've been going. You can't keep running on empty and expect to get where you someday hope to be. You can't function the way God intended for you to function when you're emotionally and spiritually dry. So this morning, I'm going to show you something that will fill your tank. I'm going to share a discovery I made many years ago. In fact, it's no exaggeration for me to say what I'm about to show you has the power to radically change your life for the better. So to get us started this morning, I'd like to enlist the help of a video you may or may not be familiar with. The video was inspired by a Stephen Curtis Chapman song called "Glorious Unfolding." The story centers on a young woman whose father has just passed away. Her sadness takes her to his home, where surprisingly she finds that her dad has left behind some airline tickets, as well as a series of clues that lead to his final message to her. What unfolds is a sort of treasure hunt that reveals the goodness of God. You want to see it? All right, let's watch it together. This is Glorious Unfolding.